order the Board of Elections regular board meeting for July 24th, 2018. Good morning. My name is Maricel Hernandez. I'm the chairwoman. Seated to my left is Commissioner Jonathan Swain, and to my right is Commissioner William Cressy. Next item on the agenda is the consideration of the agenda. Are there any proposed changes? If not, we'll proceed with the approval of the regular board meeting minutes of June 12th, 2018. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and the minutes are approved. Next is the Executive Director's Report. Mr. Goff is not here today, but we do have the next best person, Mr. Holliday.
Good morning, Madam Chairman.
Good morning. How
Fellow
are you?
Commissioners. Apologies for Mr. Goff. He had a prior appointment that he couldn't cancel today, so I'm here in his stead. Okay. So on yesterday, we had a management meeting with the heads of the city offices, along with myself, Mr. Goff, Adam Lasker, Jim Allen, Clint Hurd, Brandon Pickens, and Deborah Moss on Americans with Disabilities Act. We went over a checklist for polling places, and we had a short-term and long-term issues that they can help us with. So I would like to tender to you our agenda from yesterday and the ADA checklist for the polling place. This is from the Department of Justice. Thank you. So with that, I believe General Counsel Adam Lasker would like to have a few things to say about it.
As you know, and you're well aware, this has been a large project for the board for a while now, and I think that yesterday's meeting was a major step forward. I was very pleased that the departments showed up. Every department and the Corporation Counsel's office all seem to be taking it seriously. They understand that actions need to be done, and it's not just because the Board of Elections is asking for it, but it's compliance with the federal law. Some highlights from yesterday is that we got what sounded like a firm commitment from 2FM that they're going to take care of all the parking signs that have been a problem for us. We've been having issues with having to put up temporary parking signs in order to qualify under ADA. They're going to get those up permanently before this November election. So that's a really great thing. Also, we heard some feedback. Communication's starting to move in two directions now between us and the city, and then therefore the DOJ. So it turns out that the Park District believes that they've already remedied some 40 to 50 violations that we found early on. I think we did some surveying in 2015, sort of spot surveys, and found a bunch of ADA violations. Park District's going to send us that list, and maybe we can resurvey those locations, and they could be done. So there's stuff moving forward just from us being at the table. I really do appreciate the city's involvement yesterday. It was good, and it should continue to be so moving forward. We do have a meeting this afternoon with our contact at the Department of Justice to let them know how it went.
Okay. Very well. Jim Allen, do you have anything as far as the meeting?
No, it was a very good exchange. We kind of got tied up a little bit too much on the issue of when polling place sites move within a building unexpectedly based on the on-site managers making an independent unilateral decision, and that's really a small number of cases. When it does happen, it's very counterproductive in terms of having the right polling place, and it can lead to, for example, instead of having a polling place on the ground floor near the accessible entrance, on a second floor that requires going upstairs. So we got kind of tied up in that discussion at length, and finally tried to make it clear that that's a very small number of cases, but when it does happen, we'd appreciate their cooperation in stemming that. So there are certain parts of every agency, whether it's the Chicago Public Schools or the Park District, where a manager on site often is given a lot of latitude or autonomy to make decisions, and sometimes those are counter to what we need. So that was another topic.
Thank you. Well, I'm very happy about the progress we've been making and our push to get this meeting together and have all of these agencies come together and discuss these issues. So I'd like to thank all of you for your efforts.
We owe a special thanks, I think, to Office of Budget Management, because they have the ability to corral and insist on all these agencies. They have a little bit of persuasive power over all of the agencies. So that was very important that they helped lead that meeting with us, Ben Dietrich in particular.
Great, thank you.
Outside of that, office is just readying themselves for the upcoming election.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Holiday. Next, we have Mr. Allen again. Mr. Allen, is there anything else?
A couple of items. We're moving ahead on the canvas. That should be ready ahead of schedule. We were scheduled to drop that on or about August 1st, August 2nd. We may be able to drop that sooner, so we just have to make sure we have the postage on the meter, and then we can proceed. The post office is already aware. We've given them samples. They've filtered that information down to the station managers. So they've been contacting us this week saying, when's it going to drop, when's it going to drop. So that's good. Next, we've got our specifications out for the printing of various items, including signs, forms, envelopes, wristbands, the provisional ballot envelopes, which are kind of a hybrid product, and various other items for the upcoming 3 elections. So a lot of staff contributed a lot of information, and we rebuilt the specs from scratch. So thank you, Charles, and several other managers, including Clint Hurd, for helping put those together and revise those. Next, there was a meeting we were invited to at the last minute, and we're very pleased. It's a Just Democracy Coalition, and it was headed by the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform. I sent each of you individually a note about this meeting, and it was very impressive. The law firm of Latham and Watkins had provided pro bono research for the Illinois Campaign for Political Reform, and in turn they were reporting on case studies on vote centers. And the audience there included the Better Government Association, the League of Women Voters, the Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law, Operation Push, and several other stakeholders who are going to be important to trying to convince if there's any kind of major reform. We received some interesting feedback. They were very interested in the Denver model, and I think at their next meeting they may be trying to either Skype with or otherwise conference in some representatives from Denver to talk about the vote by mail and vote center combination, because they were very interested in that. So, and those are the 3 big items.
Okay, thank you. We'll now proceed to old business, infrastructure projects and changes in election administration, electronic poll books, and voting equipment. I think we're still in the process of assessing
Yes, we are.
everything. Mr. Lasker, anything new on legislation?
Not much, but just a little bit worth talking about. First of all, there's been no action on the bill that would require schools to close down on Election Day. We've been kind of hoping that would move forward. We know that we've been talking with Chicago Public Schools about the security concerns. We've also been talking about how we'd love to hire on teachers as election coordinators and election judges when their schools are closed down. So I'm sorry to report that still has gone nowhere since May. The governor vetoed the bill on ERIC, the Electronic Registration Information Center. That was a bill that would have prohibited the state from participating in cross-check and mandating that the state participate in ERIC. So on July 17th, the governor just vetoed that bill, which means that we're going to continue operating the way we do, which is we're using both cross-check and ERIC, trying to get the best of both worlds. The governor did sign into law a bill on on equipment disclosures to the state board. Is one issue that it has. This has become Public Act 100-0623. It was Senate Bill 2651. We are now every 2 years going to have to report to the State Board of Elections certain election information that, per the statute, at minimum is going to include the age and functionality of each item of voting equipment and a general description of the status of the voting equipment, the election authority's perceived need for new voting equipment, and the costs associated with obtaining new equipment. Interestingly, just as a side note, I was discussing with Mr. Holliday, I don't think there's ever been a requirement for election authorities to have a website. But they sort of inadvertently did that here because the last sentence of this new public act says each election authority must publish the information submitted under this section online. So we already have a website, not an issue. We'll publish that on our own website, but just kind of interesting that it seems that everyone else has to have one now too. The public act also has some slight new rules for mail-in ballot applications that are processed by third parties. So not the applications we send out directly to the voters at their request, but if a political organization or an individual, some other party wants to assist people with applying for the mail-in ballots, they may do so. They may receive those mail-in ballots at their own mailing address. This now requires that their envelope that they mail out with any applications, and it must have their current valid phone number on it. And it also codifies that they must return any applications they receive must be returned to us within 7 days, or if we are within 2 weeks of the election, they have to be returned to us within 48 hours, within 2 days.
Return means in hand or return means postal?
It's
Not clear.
turned over to the appropriate election authority. I'd say that means in hand.
In hand.
Yeah, turned over to. That's my interpretation.
And again, these are requests for ballots, not the ballots themselves.
Not the ballots themselves, but the application for the mail-in ballot, yes. So that is it on legislation.
We will proceed now to new business, and we have before us an amendment to the board's contract with Veritex Corporation for court reporting services in relation to the 2019 municipal and aldermanic elections. Mr. Lasker?
Things reportedly went quite well with Veritex. I was pleased with all of my interactions with them and the work they did, and also in the staff, see them in the room, but with the staff members that work even more directly with them. They said that scheduling was very easy. There were no late arrivals, no problems, no cancellations. So having had a smooth run with them for the March primary, for the objections related to the March primary, we now are gearing up for the 2019 election cycle objections, and we'd like to continue working with Veritex because they did a good job. Our contract does allow for an extension under the same prices. They've agreed to the same prices, and so we do request that you approve the extension.
Okay, so what we're doing basically, it's the same contract.
Yes.
We're just extending the date to include the municipal election.
That's correct. I have revised the scope of services merely to basically change the name of the elections that we're talking about.
Okay. Are there any questions?
And do we believe that this, excuse me, this contract amount will be enough to cover the number of objections we expect in 2019?
That we don't know. I'm still wanting to talk with them about what their maximum capacity is and whether they believe that they would subcontract, or we might be coming to you to request a second agreement with another agency if we find it's necessary.
Just remind me, how many did we have in 2015 objections?
I think over 300, I believe.
Yeah, 2011 is the high water.
That's the
mark.
400 one, yeah.
We had about 425.
425 in 2011?
And I would not be surprised if we are in that area
Or
again.
more.
And that was a pretty intense time. I don't care to relive it.
Well, we will be.
I guess.
Well, we'll live a different version of it.
Yes.
I guess as relates to this, I guess the question is, based on historical activity, is it similar this year, the activity prior to the election as it was in terms of announcements and things of that nature as it was in 2011? Just to get some kind of gauge as to whether or not this contract is enough for to be able to figure out.
You know, it's anybody's guess, and it's going to depend on how clean the petitions are that come in, how many people file against each other to run for office. Our sense is that there's a lot of activity out there, and that the typical 200 to 250 cases, we're probably going to surpass that. But it's guesswork that's, you know, way beyond me to your eyes.
Sure. Sure. Okay. So, in other words, what you'll be saying is either we will be coming back amending this contract to exceed this number of 500,000, or having another contract with someone else, based on the activity.
Yeah, and in my discussions with Mr. Goff, we came into the $500,000 mark because he believes that we spent approximately that in the last round of municipal objections. So we're hoping that that will cover everything. It's more an issue of manpower. Do they have enough reporters? Right. And we will most likely, I'll say, bifurcate the initial hearings to have a morning session and an afternoon session, or one day and the next day. That then cuts in half the amount of living, breathing bodies we need to have in terms of court reporters, and also hearing officers for that matter. So.
Okay.
Mr. Lasker, Veritex did a great job this past year. There were about 40 cases that we had.
Correct.
And approximately total billing.
I don't. I can get
But
that.
it was based on that this 500.
This was a much lower number for March. Yeah. Did Peter?
32,000. 32,000. Oh. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. If there are no further questions, is there a motion to approve amendment number 1 to the board's contract with Veritex Corporation for court reporting services in relation to the 2019 municipal and aldermanic elections with an extended term of September 27, 2018 through September 27, 2019, and the dollar amount not to exceed $500,000.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes and the contract is approved. Next on the agenda is a legal report. Mr. Lasker.
So I'm sure we all heard that somewhat recently there was an indictment for 12 Russian government officials for alleged interference with our 2016 elections. You might also be aware that very shortly after that announcement, Congress removed from an appropriations bill funds for election security, and then passed the bill without that in it. So we are not getting very much help from the federal government on what I believe is a federal, national, if not international issue. So we're still trying internally to figure out how to deal with that and how to make sure that we're good and ready. And as you know, we've hired consultants that are here now doing analysis of our systems and advising us on best practices. I also want to start talking with you board members individually about some other things, some development that we're looking into, possible development of new technologies that would put us above and beyond anybody else and make us even more secure. So we'll follow up about that offline. A little bit of an update on the case of Segovia versus United States, and also we are a nominal defendant, as is the Rock Island County Clerk. We are involved in the lawsuit simply because some of the plaintiffs live here. That is now at the Supreme Court level with the pending petition of writ for certiorari. The court has requested or ordered us to file a response. We have contacted the Attorney General's office, and I note that there's a statute on the Attorney General's duties, and the first duty on the list is to represent and defend the state and the people of the state in any legal matter in front of the Supreme Court. Well, the Attorney General's office has again declined to step in and defend the state. I can only assume that they read that statute to mean the Illinois Supreme Court, even though it just says Supreme Court. Nonetheless, we will be filing our response letter this Friday to inform the Supreme Court that we've notified the Attorney General. The Attorney General is not going to defend the state law, and as we previously discussed, we'll set forth a little history as to how the law works and how we operate underneath it, but we're not taking a position for or against it. And on the legal grounds, that's about it for today.
If there are no questions, we'll proceed next to the financial report. We have a balance sheet and voucher listing for the City of Chicago, a 2018 appropriation, number 1806, dated July 24th, 2018, in the amount of $349,608.38. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next, we have a balance sheet and voucher listings for the County of Cook, 2018 appropriation number 18-06, dated July 24, 2018, in the amount of $372,569.69. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Next is public comment. I did not receive any requests for public comment. So, Mr. Lasker, is there a need for executive session?
Not today.
Not today. And so, as a result, is there a motion to adjourn to our next regularly scheduled meeting on August 14th, 2018 at 9:30 a.m.?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion, meeting adjourned. Thank you.